All right. Well, hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're so excited to be here with you. Please know that we're recording this webinar today. We want to be able to share it with folks who weren't able to join, and we will also send you a copy as well. Another housekeeping thing is that we will set aside 5 minutes at the end of this presentation for questions. So feel free to send us any that you have throughout the chat, and we will get to them at the end. So really, let's dive into it. We're excited to walk you through the ways that you can attract and engage students who are most qualified for your school. And the two who will be talking to you about that topic are Chris and Janet. Chris DiSano here, he's the VP of Client Services and an agency partner, and he's been with us since 2014. He's the account lead and strategist for the majority of our higher ed client partnerships. And as a practicing attorney and college basketball analyst, he has, we could say, a wealth of knowledge that he'll bring to the table on today's topic. And we also have Janet Farrell, who's the Director of Digital Services here at RDW. Prior to joining us, she was at Brown University for 7 years, owning the marketing and enrollment strategy for the institution. So we're very grateful and lucky to have her leading the efforts here at RDW for all digital, social, and analytics strategies for our client partners. So I'm going to let them do the talking, pass the baton to them, and they will walk you through today's very important topic.
Hey, everybody. It's great to be here with all of you. Great to be here with Cassie and Janet. Janet and I actually started as partner and client. Janet was at Brown University School of Professional Studies, and we did a lot of work with Brown. And now we've been very fortunate to work with one another for the last 3.5 years and counting. So should be a great day today. In terms of the goal, what we really want to do is just get ourselves thinking critically about strategy. You know, the deliberate choices that we need to make to set ourselves, our departments, and our institutions up for marketing success as we move forward. Really, we want to help you today to learn how to identify, attract, and engage right fit students for your school. It's about fit, and not everyone is or will be or should be a fit for your institution. Heard a great quote a couple of weeks ago, and I think it's applicable to today, that, you know, the best answer is yes, but the second best answer is often no, because it's definitive, it allows for a clear understanding of next steps, and allows you to plan. And we're just excited in the short time we have today to dive into a lot of different topics in terms of IDing, attracting, and engaging these right fit students. So with that said, the reality is we understand. Janet was on the higher ed side. I worked in higher education for 3.5 years myself. We know the context within which you operate. A lot of times you have smaller teams, lots of constituents to keep happy, and day-to-day asks coming from left field that might place you in reactive spots or tight spots. You've got budgets that are often shrinking or level, and you have an inability at times to step back like you are today, which is why this is so critical, and think bigger picture. So we empathize with that. Out there these days, there is a sea of sameness as well. And what do we mean by this? Well, if we take a look at and examine these next few slides, it really becomes difficult to stand out from the pack. And so much of what we see out there these days is rational or features-driven advertising. It might be top-down, school-first messaging with no connection to the audience that's really trying to be or sought to be engaged by the institution. Stock imagery, very functional stuff. If you white labeled, in fact, a lot of what we see these days, and we did this with an engineering school client of ours, a very esteemed institution, probably 5 or 6 years ago, to illustrate the point. It's often difficult to tell one institution from the next. This goes on and on in the form of this sort of features-driven advertising. So that brings us to the million-dollar question.
Yeah, so the real question we're here to answer today and to talk about for Chris and I here is, you know, how do we break through the noise to attract and retain your right fit prospective student? You know, there's lots of different ways to do this, and we've really found some success with these 3 primary pillars that we find here, and that we really see that our client's opportunity lives right in that center of those 3 things. So we have the landscape, your institution or school and your audience. And so here we're going to kind of kick things off, and Chris is going to start taking you through the landscape.
Yeah, so these are equally important, but let's start here with the landscape. We believe that it's vital to have a general understanding on a macro level, right? Take a look around. Sometimes you hear in business schools pest analysis type stuff, political, economic, societal, technological, and industry-wise, right? Whether it's keeping up on ed tech trends or the micro-credentialing burst that's been occurring over the past few years, transfer enrollment shifts, et cetera, all these types of variables and issues that come into play. Now, putting aside the product, which we recognize is a massive component, right, of what you have to market every day, but is obviously often out of your control. We can only do so much as marketers. But what we want to do is really take a look around and ask, where do we fit in the landscape? So once we examine these industry trends, we want to scan competitor, peer institutions, and aspirational ones too. We also want to think about non-traditional competitors. You know, for instance, Arizona State is huge out there in the online space, but it's not just about who they might rub up against in terms of a traditional institution. It's also about the Coursera's of the world. Take the time, you know, we believe so strongly in research. Take the time to invest in understanding the marketplace and your peers. It's a worthwhile investment. You know, our approach, we audit holistically often, and we also sometimes will do purely digital or social audits. If it's a holistic audit, we might, you know, from a tactical perspective, go out to 3 to 5 institutions. We're going to review their assets, both online and offline. We'll do things like sign up for dummy email marketing lists so that we can make sure that we're understanding what their approach is there, what their messaging is, what they're prioritizing, their cadence and frequency, and then really try to lift whether it's best practices or things that perhaps we don't want to emulate from some of these schools, to try to find gaps and opportunities where we can fit in among our competitor set as a class, but distinguish ourselves vis-a-vis each one of them and stand out. So, you know, when we see their properties or assets, what comes to mind? How are they telling their story? Are there gaps, as I said, for us to exploit? And most importantly, can we authentically claim the space that we're thinking about? It makes no sense to try to be something that you're not, especially in this day and age of informational overload. Our audiences are well-versed in cutting through and understanding what rings as synthetic and not authentic. So you can only be you can only be your own institution. So figure out who's doing what well and try to make that audit set broader than just your direct competitors, to challenge yourself, to think within constraints, but move beyond maybe the particular box that traditionally folks might think you occupy. Now, let's talk about your institution a little bit. On a parallel path, it's critically important that we get self-aware. And so we want to think about our own institution. A lot of times we'll convene a diverse group of individuals from the school who explain, you know, faculty, staff, key leadership, marketing and admissions professionals, alumni, current students, to explore questions, you know, such as, if our institution ceased to exist, what would the world be missing? We're really trying to hit on emotional and aspirational triggers rather just rational functional features. And that's what this is all about. Rise above just features components. Who's the prototypical, you know, our school student or alum? What's our personality? Are we where we want to be? What, you know, when our school name is mentioned out there in the wilderness, you know, what is the space that we occupy in, you know, current or prospective students' minds? All these types of questions get us to think deeper. Are there misperceptions out there, right? Are there legacy perceptions about our institution that we wish to change? Are there other attributes that we think, you know, we're really doing a great job with, and we want to make sure that we continue to perpetuate those or perhaps amplify them because the story needs to be told in a greater, more impactful way? So it's all about thinking deeply there. We want to challenge ourselves to just dig deeper. Then it's about bringing these discoveries to life. Now, this can be done, you know, a number of different ways, but I think the critical takeaway here is you've got to see the forest through the trees. A lot of times when we convene internal groups or when schools convene internal groups, and Janet and I have both been there, there's a lot of Kool-Aid drinking going on, right? Because we're invested, we care about our product, our institution, but it often sometimes becomes a little bit difficult then to sort of peel back the layers and think about things objectively. So for exploration with our clients, we like to develop a few brand positioning directions. So coming out of those ideation sessions, which is, you know, the industry term, but call them brainstorms, group thinks, whatever you want. You want to come up with maybe 3 to 5 brand positioning directions. So these are single-minded ideas in the form of statements that basically are authentic to your school and also connect a truth about your audience with what the school values. So you're really trying to form that bond through these statements. We want to test the directions with, you know, our priority, our key audiences, and see what resonates, and then refine if necessary. After we do that, we want to try to land on one statement. Now, a positioning statement is an internal tool. It's meant to be a touchstone that guides our internal teams and departments, you know, across the institutional landscape in terms of how we should think about our institution, our brand, and conveying that communication externally. But it's an internally facing document, so to speak, or statement. We want to bring that to life in 3 or 4 creative concepts. So, you know, these are going to be laced with art direction, obviously, and you also want to make sure that they are diversified from one another. You don't want to take, let's say, one positioning. We'll show you a practical example of this. You don't want to take one position that you land on and have 4 creative concepts look similar. Maybe one of them is going to, you know, tug upon something a bit more, a bit heavier than another one does. You want to bring those concepts to life, test the concepts with priority audiences, and be open to feedback. Now, we talked about at the top of this cast, the fact that a lot of times our teams are small, our budgets are small. We realize that convening, you know, 5-figure focus groups is not potentially feasible for every institution, your institution. That's okay. There are other groups that you can access, you know, in terms of constituencies to just get objective outside feedback. And that's the most important part. Even if you have to tab, you know, perhaps a pool of local high school students that may be nearby, you know, students from accelerated programs, if enrollment marketing at the undergraduate level is your goal. Just try to see outside of your institution's footprint and get some objective feedback. That's what's most important. Be open to that feedback, go back and refine.
So now let's dig in a bit on your audience. You know, you really can have the most perfect positioning for your institution, the best creative representation that really sets you apart. But if you aren't able to really understand and reach your audience effectively with that messaging and positioning, you know, it's not going to hit home, right? So let's talk a little bit about how we start and take you there. So typically how we would start to dig in on audience is to really lay it out in this type of a persona look and feel, right? And it allows us to dig in on 4 to 5 key areas, which with each of those audiences. So who are they, right? What is their age? Are you looking as part of your campaign to drive awareness with, you know, prospective students, individuals who are coming out of high school to join your institution? Are you looking at more continuing education or executive education level? Is this more of a just general brand awareness campaign, which may have a much broader audience? We see a lot of our clients who kind of start big, right? Kind of everyone is their audience. They want to reach, you know, legislators and thought leaders and all these individuals. And what we typically find as we go through this process is that we're able to really refine it down to a core audience to really help them meet their goals. So understanding who they are. In addition to that, it's essential that you understand what their motivations are to take that next step and engage with your institution, and also what those barriers and considerations are. Why might they not be ready to engage with you? What are those things that hold them back? Do they have existing student loan debt? Do they have children that they need to take care of? Are they working full time and they have other things pulling on their time that really need their focus, right? So what are those different barriers as part of their consideration to engage? And then what's that key messaging? That goes a bit back to the creative and how those things weave together with these audiences. But what are the key messages that this audience really needs in order to guide them through their process. And last but certainly not least, in order to reach them, you really need to understand how they're consuming media. So do you have a younger target audience who are digital natives? Do you have an older or more professional audience here where you want to hit them when they're thinking more about their career and next steps? Truly being able to understand and dig in on how they're using media day to day, it really is essential to help us determine the right media mix to ultimately reach these audiences. And we typically lean on some syndicated research tools like Nielsen to support us in those efforts. So what do we do next, right? We have all this great information about our students or our prospective audience, depending on your campaign goals. The next step really is to understand the full journey, right? And as Chris said earlier, we understand, research can be daunting, but there are absolutely more palatable ways to address those sorts of things, right? So you need to talk with your prospective students. A lot of this information from these personas, that's where it comes from, right? Talk to that low-hanging fruit, the students you currently have, find local prospective audiences that you can tap into to really understand kind of what those things are. And then also through that, you're going to be able to unearth a lot more about the journey and the importance of how that messaging and those tactics and ultimately what you want those different audiences to do at different stages throughout their engagement with you in order to guide them effectively to your campaign goal, right? So ultimately, if you're driving an awareness campaign and you want to be able to drive someone to take an action, maybe it's complete an inquiry form, you're going to tailor that messaging at their different levels to really address their barriers. Maybe you're using a landing page, and if you've dug into that persona and you know all those different barriers that they might be concerned about, you're going to want to identify them and really speak to your audiences right on that landing page. Again, keeping their journey in mind. They're going to appreciate you speaking to those things that they're concerned with, and they're really going to self-identify at the various stages of the journey to really, again, find that connection. So they're going to help be that right fit connection as you go through and really understand and guide them through that journey.
So we teased it before, but let's take a look at a practical example with North Shore Community College. I may say NSCC or North Shore, those are interchangeable. North Shore is a great client. They've been a client of ours now for about 3.5 or 4 years. And the school had so much to offer when we began working with them a few years back. It more for them was about harnessing that and an understanding of it and bringing this to the market impactfully so that they could speak to their audiences sincerely and aspirationally, again, rising above features and commodities. So we took them through a similar process, convening groups of faculty, key leaders, staff and marketing admissions folks, current students, and recently admitted students to ask many of the questions that we covered on slide 16. So as we dig into that brand positioning development, what we were able to do is narrow in on traits and characteristics of North Shore that separated, along with some of the perceptions that it wanted to shed. We developed 3 or 4 authentic positioning directions that we tested, which again connected a truth about their audience with NSCC's mission and values and the space that we wanted to occupy, the space we wanted North Shore to occupy in the minds of those key audiences that it was seeking to engage. We had rich findings that came out of these ideation sessions that really formed the foundation for us to pinpoint a brand positioning statement. And we landed ultimately, and here's sort of a Cliff's Notes version at a broad positioning theme, because a positioning statement, again, is an internally facing document as a good partner, to the institutions with whom we work, North Shore among them. We're not going to share that positioning verbatim here, but the broad strokes of it were about individual empowerment and a positioning of dedication to helping folks from every walk of life, generate the mobility that they deserve to really be able to achieve career aspirations and the knowledge that obviously goes part and parcel with that. So it's the individual empowerment theme. A lot of our work was taking place really during the early stages of the pandemic. We know from a nationwide perspective that community college enrollments, have been declining in recent years. And it was really important for North Shore to continue to be out there and be an active player in its community and disseminate that message of how they can truly enrich and bring value to the students' lives that are fortunate enough to attend the institution. So we went through that positioning development and landed on one, as I just spoke about, and then got into concept testing. So once you have the uniqueness defined in an authentic way, you've got to bring it to life creatively, right? We talked about this a little bit earlier. And here are some cutting room floor examples of concepts bringing this individual and sort of community, laddering up to community empowerment theme to life. You want to range for testing purposes when you do this. And again, you don't have to convene 5-figure focus groups necessarily. You know, you can generate some type of concepts or different looks and share them around with audiences that are going to give you real, true, unvarnished feedback. We believe strongly in this rich qualitative feedback, and North Shore leadership does too. So, you know, another thing I want to mention here too is, in addition to sort of going the informal route, there are some softwares out there. Remesh is one, R-E-M-E-S-H, that we have used with another client that allows you to get out and at least probe, you know, for some impressions on what you're sharing in a more cost-effective way. So went through this concept testing, and ultimately North Shore landed on one of these to move forward with. But first, a word from Janet.
Well, as we kind of said earlier on here, understanding that audience, you can have that great creative messaging, but how are we going to get it in front of them, right? So that's where the media strategy piece really does come in as an important element of that campaign execution. So for North Shore Community College, we really, again, thinking about how our target audience is consuming media, wanted to meet the target audience where they were, right? So we leveraged a variety of tactics based on our syndicated research that helped us understand a bit more about where they were spending their time. Our media mix here really was primarily digital for a few reasons, but one of those reasons really being not only their media usage, but also allowing us the ability, which was very important as part of this campaign, to really be able to measure and monitor success, be able to continue to optimize throughout the duration of the campaign, and even do some live kind of message testing in market, in addition to some of that earlier testing we did with focus groups. So we utilized a smattering of digital channels, paid search, social media, including Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat, as well as streaming audio platforms, and also some digital display and remarketing coupled there as well, again, to use different messaging throughout that remarketing to really pull our target audiences through that journey.
So as we take a look, North Shore landed on this particular creative concept in terms of bringing this positioning and theme of individual empowerment forth into the market. So we got into production across mediums that were called for in the campaign and media strategy, as Janet just touched upon. And these online banners right here are shown just as an example of what went into and what is currently out there in the wild. They're bold, they're personalized, they're representative of North Shore's true student population. These are actual students at North Shore that have gone through the programs. They're versatile in their messaging combinations and the flexibility that gives us to hit different notes of individual empowerment. And you know, they really evoke this authentic feeling and messaging of North Shore as a steward of these students' journeys. And so our aim was to really speak directly to these potential students in an encouraging and uplifting way. We're dealing with, you know, new high school grads, you know, sometimes folks that have a few years of life experience or are first generation, you know, to attend any type of higher education. English as a second language is a large contingent. And so we needed to make sure that the creative and the messaging that we put out there was true to North Shore's compass. They can be who they are, and they can connect very richly and authentically with the audiences that they serve.
So what were the results, right? Let's get to the nitty gritty here. You know, with the goals of our campaign really focusing around generating that awareness of North Shore in the marketplace and engaging and ultimately driving consideration, right, for prospective students here, we really leaned back on that journey and the different stages of awareness, consideration, decision, and in this case, application, to understand and measure the success of our campaign. So over over the course of 6 months, we drove 7.5 million impressions from our paid media campaign. That really did turn into that consideration phase. From there, we saw 608,000 website sessions, and really important were some micro conversions that we tracked along the way. So that included engagements that users made on site. And this is really where that important metric comes in of quality. It's important that we weren't just driving overarching awareness, but that we could understand from the engagement on site that these were quality and interested users who really were taking those actions that we wanted them to take, right? Engage with us. So 547 qualified website applications, and ultimately we were able to track almost 140 application inquiries back to the paid media campaign. At the end of the day, and based on our campaign goals, we were very happy with the results here, and the North Shore Community College client was as well.
So to summarize, here are a few key thoughts to leave you with today. First, again, put the periscope up, right? And take an objective look around at sort of the macro forces that might be shaping the industry, and then the industry landscape and your competitor peer institutions, and some aspirational ones. Really dig deep to understand and know what your institution is good at. What's the essence? What is it that you're truly proud of and that can be used to set you apart beyond just typical features and commodities where someone can build a better mousetrap? What is it that separates you uniquely as part of your DNA?
And if we didn't harp on it enough, get and take the time to really understand your audiences. It is essential at each stage of the journey, from understanding that messaging to understanding how to reach that audience and everything in between. It's really important to dedicate time and resources, even options that aren't necessarily expensive, to really make sure you're honing in appropriately there. Setting clear KPIs and being able to measure success, also very important throughout the campaign. Setting those goals at the forefront, making sure that you're following through and really remain focused on them throughout the duration of the campaign. It's essential to understand success and really make sure all of your campaign elements, from messaging to media execution, remain focused throughout the duration of your work. And embrace a test and refine mindset. This is not only a science; it's also an art, and there are lots of factors that can and should be continually refined throughout the process to make sure that your campaigns are a success. So be open to that along the way.
Janet and Chris, thank you both so much. We're at the end of the webinar. You guys know this space extremely well, so we'd love to open up some questions from the audience so that you can help them answer any of their questions. I know we have just a couple minutes, so I will ask just a couple questions that I received during the webinar. The first one being that you mentioned looking at industry trends. Where do we look for this?
Yeah, great question. In addition to just normal publications and stomping grounds that I'm sure that we all have as professionals, or even seeing special reports in the Wall Street Journal or what have you, Higher Ed Dive is obviously a website that is up with the trends inside higher ed as well. Also, have come across a couple of podcasts recently and tried them out that I like. One is called the Enrollment Insights podcast. So if that's sort of your laser focus, enrollment marketing, that's a good one. And then one that I have not checked out yet in the spirit of true candor, but want to, is called Times Higher Education. That's just a monthly podcast. The Enrollment Insights has a much higher frequency, sometimes even a couple times per week. If there's a sort of a burst or nugget of information that's brand new in the space. But the Times Higher Education looks good and comes out monthly as well. So those are sources that I consult, or certainly am going to consult, in terms of that Times Higher Education podcast.
Great. And on kind of the same topic here, are there any tools in terms of industry trends that we can use to automate this process?
Janet, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, as far as industry trends, I think there's really not a ton of automation if I'm understanding the question 100% there. It's really about, though, you can set up, email notifications and those sorts of things to keep you on top of those things. All of those sources offer some level of ability to really dig in on those trends at a macro level, and offer lots of automation opportunities to kind of ping them to you. Those digest emails I know save me regularly.
Great. Well, we are at the time. So if anyone else has any additional questions, feel free to email them at this info@rdwgroup.com, and we will be in touch with you and answer any questions that you have. So thank you, Janet and Chris, so much for taking the time to walk everyone through this really important topic. And everyone else, we will share this recording with you just so you have it in your back pocket for future use. So thank you,
Pleasure.
everyone,
Thanks,
and we hope you have a great day.
Thanks,
everybody.